Greetings and welcome to this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto, and we have a slightly different show this week. I have a wonderful panel of three other guests plus myself. We're going to be talking about a subject that's near and dear to all of our hearts, and that's really diversity and diversity in our industry. There are a lot of topics to talk about. There's what's going on in terms of making accommodations for the diverse. There's what happened with virtual meetings that was really good for, and people are pulling back from virtual meetings, and then just generally what's happening in the industry. So let me have my guests introduce themselves. Iffat, let me start with you. Why don't you tell everybody who you are and what you do?
I'm Iffat Chaudhry. I'm based in the UK and I work for Involve Visual Collaboration. We're well, in the loosest possible term, maybe an integrator, because the business has moved so far away from traditional AV, and also have a very, very small podcast called What If that you might have heard of.
That's a stretch of the definition small, but I'll certainly come back to you. Jenn, you're next on my screen. Why don't you introduce yourself and tell everybody who you are and what you do in our industry?
Thanks for having me. I'm Jenn Steinhardt. I am a audiovisual design consultant with Shen Milsman Wilkie. And I'm also the chair of the Diversity Council. And while I have not been quite as active as Iffat has been on her amazing What If podcasts, you can find me on YouTube with Nerdy Girl AV chats on mental health as well.
Thank you very much, Jenn. And Kaz, you're the final. Let us know let everybody know who you are and what you do.
Hi, David. So I'm Kaz Pearman. My title is Many Hats, One Voice. I work in and around the world of AV and broadcast and tech from a point of view of bringing people together for events that we all know and love all over the world, and also in the worlds of neurodiversity as well. And I've done a podcast as well called Wired Differently, which was aired at the beginning of this year. So looking forward to having this conversation today.
So in the realm of what's known as disclosure, let me tell everybody that I'm the parent of two adult sons. One is 30, or about to be 30, and the other one is 28. And both of them were born on the autistic spectrum. The diagnosis at the time was PDD-NOS, and in the late 1990s, which is when we had them diagnosed, the term neurodiversity didn't exist, or at least it wasn't popularized in popular culture. It was a huge uphill battle for my wife and I. And, if you've ever been a parent of a kid on the spectrum, you kind of know what I'm talking about. There are a lot of challenges, and, you rise to the challenge as much as you can. One of the things that burns me very much is, the idea of when people use lines for the disabled or lines for the handicap, or get a pass at a theme park, and somebody looks at you and say, "You're not disabled." It's like you can't see every disability. So that's been interesting. I'm in my fourth decade. I think it's 46 years in this industry. And a lot of my peers have or are about to retire, and they have their summer home and their boats, and, they've spent a lot of money. I don't have that. I live modestly in the middle of New Jersey, but I have two kids that graduated from Rutgers, and will probably be successful in life. And I think I spent my money well. So that's that, and that's my story. I could give you 1,000 descriptions of those theme park visits, or just going to a diner or anything like that. It's more difficult for everybody. It's more difficult in our industry. And we've never had an award or a challenge, not that we should, for the diverse in our industry, but we should be recognizing it better. So that's my disclosure. Iffat, let me go with you. Why does this subject interest you most?
So, as you know, in terms of my podcast, I am serving on the Avixa Women's Council for the UK. I'm currently co-leading that, but my passion has never been just for women's causes or race causes, because I tick that box, right? So I tick the box for person of color, I tick the box for being a female, and that kind of serves its purpose sometimes in some situations. For me, discrimination of any kind is a real, like, whatever form that takes. And I think what gives me a bit of a fire in my belly really is when I see situations where people are not being treated equitably. And people don't understand the word equity. So I on purpose used the word equity in my strapline a couple of years ago. And I'm glad it's being used more often now. but I'm equally surprised when I see people who are very worldly, very knowledgeable about business and life, who don't understand what equity means and how easy it actually is to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
You know, treating people as individuals and dealing with the person who is presenting in front of you and what works for them, instead of saying, well, we've got a policy and it's, you know, that's it. And that, you know, and that's where it ends, because it's a tick in the box and everyone needs to fit into that box. Well, we just don't. Humans don't.
It drives me crazy that for years Infocom had a Women in AV award. And I gotten in a lot of trouble over the years by protesting that, by a lot of women who were upset that I was protesting it. But that's not the answer. The answer is you give people an award for what they do in AV. It shouldn't matter that there's a gender involved. You shouldn't be giving that award to men every year and have to come up with another category for women. There are plenty of women. So yeah, there's real equality and diversity and equity, and then there's fake equality and diversity and equity. And you know, that gets to me as well.
Yeah. And David, the term for neurodiversity, that this stemmed from sociology. So I have my master's in sociology. So I always love to geek out about this when I have a chance.
Awesome.
That it kind of stemmed from, you know, the traditional way that we looked at autism was this medical model, you know, and the way that it was treated was to, you know, we're going very early on to institutionalize. And so the fact that, you know, we're here having this conversation about ways to support people with neurodiversity makes it a very exciting time to be neurodivergent in the workplace. And it's really describing people that are, you know, wired differently, that, you know, you have autism, ADHD, learning disorders, and you know, anything that's in that neurodevelopmental standpoint. Also Tourette's, which I also literally tick that box as well.
You're so right,
yeah,
Jen.
Sorry, interesting use of terms there. And if I'm not mistaken, and I'm way out of my league in making this comment, but I believe that, you know, I don't know what's current. DSM-5 is current, or DSM-6. But I believe that Asperger's has been removed as a diagnosis, which is insane.
Really insane.
So yeah, a lot of it. So thank you, Jen. I appreciate that. Kaz, your turn for a second. Give everybody your perspective on what's going on and where we are.
Yeah, so my strapline has been for many years making the invisible visible, and my advocacy has been primarily due to my daughter going through the whole process. You were talking about your sons. I got to know myself through advocating for her, and as of 48 hours ago, I'm officially ADHD at the age of 46. And I had the psychiatrist apologize again for the fact that, you know, what this we're all basing this on is studies which were made for white men, boys, middle class. And here I am as an individual trying to convince someone. And I think that's where we are at the moment. I think for lots of people, we come at a point where we're exhausted, and it's like, we don't want the spotlight. I'm not here to get a pin or a label. I just need kindness. And, you know, we get the classic, well, you don't look like you have ADHD. Really? You? And it's like, well, I've done my strategies all this time in my work and everything and at home without realizing it. And I think, you know, that element of just being more empathetic. And I think as we have this conversation, as we make that lens shift over, so making it visible so that people feel comfortable to go, yeah, I have, but it doesn't impact me, and it won't impact my job chances and me going for that job when your self-esteem is already really low. And yes, I'm just to be honest with you now, I have to really concentrate because my mind goes off on a little tangent. So apologies, I hate it.
That's okay. We were all going off on tangents. That's the nature.
Good, that's great. Yeah,
I'd like to just pick up on something that Kaz said, if I may, David. But
yeah,
there have been, I mean, there's quite a lot of research in the UK, certainly around disclosure. So adults generally will not disclose to their employers that they have any kind of difficulty when it's not visible.
Absolutely.
Because unfortunately, we do live in a world where people do look at that and think, I'm going to have to treat this person differently, or I'm going to have to spend money on them, or I'm going to have to make adjustments, or the rest of the team are going to have to do, instead of actually just giving that person a chance.
Absolutely. And very often it will be, well, what's your access need? Like you were saying, that business of cost. And, automatically is, what box are you fitting in? Where am I going to put you? I've met one autistic person before and we did this. I'm assuming we're going to do the same. It's like, no, we all come with a different set of not necessarily needs, but requirements. And I think that's by understanding. Yeah, absolutely.
Huge talent.
There hasn't been a really good model for social understanding of what we're talking about with neurodiversity. I mean, everybody thinks Rain Man, and they make the incorrect assumption that there's no social ability, and they make the incorrect assumption that there are savant skills, and neither one of those are necessarily true. We learned to call autism an umbrella spectrum when I was raising my kids, because there are whole bunches of traits that are included on it, but everybody has different ones. And the township that I was had my kids in at the time referred to children with autism as little resource drains, because they felt that they were taking money from all the rest of the programs that could be done, when what we're really trying to do is give them enough ability so that they're not resource drains for the rest of their lives, so that they can be in independent living and have a job and do what they need to do. So that there's been a lot of learning involved. You guys are closer than I am to what's going on in our industry, Jen, especially you as the head of the AVIXA Council on Diversity. Have we started to do a better job educating the employers in our space about what accommodations are and what people need and what the value is, and dealing with people with disabilities and neurodivergent individuals?
I think that we're starting the conversation. I don't think that we're where we need to be just yet. And the fact that there has been a lot of pickup between, I would say, the last 2 years with Infocom and through webinars, and the awareness has really picked up, and I have a lot of faith in it. And some companies have been offering awareness campaigns, trainings, things like that. But overall, the awareness and stigma is still very, very strongly there. And it's not out of a bad place, but as much of when you're talking about a disorder that's based around a lot of challenges with communication, sociability, and also having many co-occurring additions. Co-occurring, the other term you might hear is comorbidities. So this would be that you're diagnosed with, say, autism, you also have ADHD, anxiety, depression, and then learning disorders. So it's very common to have many of these conditions interacting with each other. And that affects trust when you don't know what you don't know. Not that that's okay, but that's the situation that we're in. So now that we're talking about it, I think that you'll start seeing more programs popping up. Like, for example, Microsoft has an Autism at Work playbook. There's a few that are more in the tech spaces that are doing some really good things with programs. We need to be seeing more of that in our industry, because it's a perfect place for us.
Absolutely. I was going to say, apologies, but this industry is primarily, if we're going to be honest, built with so many people who are neurodivergent and may not know it yet. So therefore, that's why we're attracted to this space for many multiple reasons. And like with Microsoft, like with Google, those who've gone before us who are now saying that they are neurodivergent, it's like, well, it's not the fact that we're just discovering people or uncovering them. They've been there this whole time. And, that tricky person, as you were saying, knowing how that person communicates. And, each one of us comes with a little manual, right? And I think it doesn't take much to ask the question or have the safe place for people to go, actually, in order for me to thrive, I need to know that this is my safe place, that you get me, that if I'm going to take a day off, you're not going to judge me. So a lot of people in this industry are also burnt out. You know, those who've gone off long-term sick, you know, for a different label. So we're now only discovering, oh, it's because of that. You know, it's just like we're going through this whole kind of detective series where we're unpacking everything, we're getting to the root of it. And I think that's what we need to do. And it's like re-scaffolding workplaces to go, you don't need to change. We just need to shift the scaffolding poles and you'll be fine.
There's also a great deal, unfortunately, of stigma around medication for people that are diagnosed. You know, there's unfortunately amongst many parents, there's the I don't want to give my child drugs. I don't want to do this. I don't. There's a lot of you know, denial ain't just a river in Egypt. If we're able to use medications, prescription medications, to correct chemical imbalances that occurred, you know, again, that's a neurological, physiological condition. We're improving it. There shouldn't be a stigma around that. And you know, when you have kids that are growing up, Kaz, you know, you're talking about your daughter, you know, you sometimes have to make difficult decisions for them, but when they become adults, they can make the decisions for themselves. My eldest, I believe, was on Concerta for forever, until he finally decided that he's going to manage his life without it because he prefers the feeling that he has when he's not on the medication. My youngest, again, he's 2 years younger, he's 28, still takes certain meds because they make him feel better. They make him able to function in life. There should be no stigma around any of that because it's just, as you point out, Iffat, it's equity. It's what do we need to do to provide a circumstance where people can thrive equitably.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point about education and training, I have been running some sessions which certain organizations have asked me to do for their staff, and it is around awareness and around education and really understanding terminology. And actually, a session that I did late last year around neurodiversity, the result of that, there were people on that call who disclosed to each other, who sat in the same room, in the same team, who then said, well, actually, I was diagnosed as bipolar this time, you know, this many months ago, and hadn't disclosed it before that session. So it was a bit of a goosebump moment. Unfortunately, the stigma is a really hard one to crack, and that sits around mental health. And I think what people don't understand is breaking the stigma is actually good for all of us, wherever we are, whatever we're going through, because no 2 days are the same. And you know, Jenn, when you were talking about all the other pressures that might lead to depression or anxiety, there might be somebody without any kind of other diagnosis who's going through that and struggling, you know, from one day to the next. The stigma and it really, it just ties in so beautifully with what you said as well, Kaz, about kindness. When we stop judging people, that's when we'll make a difference. And unfortunately, while we still have people in positions of power where you hear of managers who are saying, oh, that person is off again, and rolling their eyes and saying, apparently they're sick. And if that's the tone in your office space and other workers are hearing that, then A, you're going to shut down and say, well, next time I feel like that, I'm not sharing it because I don't want to be the topic of gossip. But B, it gives a license to everyone else to keep that stigma going and keep that judgment alive. And unfortunately, I hear about those stories so regularly still, and it's 2024. It's shameful, but it exists and it persists. And that, I think that's the nut we need to crack.
Which is why, for a lot of people who are neurodivergent, like myself, working from home in a space like this, where you don't have to deal with that, as you were saying, if that culture, because you sense it, you pick up on it, you know it's there. And on top of everything else that's going on, you're dealing with that. And you're supposed to do a job. And you can probably do your job in a quicker amount of time than others because that's how our brains are wired. We may just do it differently. And I think we're continually trying to fit the mold. We're trying to fit into society's ways of us behaving.
Yeah.
Well, if we do truly move into an outcome-based world, which is what we should do for knowledge workers, so we're not judging on time, we're not judging on hours, we're judging on are we achieving our goals, that would be very good for this community and good for all communities. Unfortunately, again, we have a lot of, as we've seen with this whole return to office movement, we have a lot of older, stodgy managers who don't feel like their people are working for them unless they see, butts in seats.
The
And
clock watchers.
yeah, it's a difficult environment for everyone, certainly for the neurodivergent community.
And it really does dampen down people's creativity because they suddenly think, oh, well, I better not do that because somebody might not like it. And it's just, I am so sure and if I had the time, the budget, and ability to do some research around it, I would love to. I'm sure it kills productivity.
I'm sure, but nobody cares about the productivity measure. We've got plenty of measures out there that show that working from home is more productive, but they don't care because they don't feel a sense of control, which is what this is
That's what it boils down to.
about.
Yeah.
So we're improving the space by continually talking about it. That was the point of this episode of UC Weekly News. Certainly in our industry, in the technology industry, as you point out, Kaz, we need to have more conversations about this, bring this to the light of day, make people aware that these challenges can be overcome and that there is an opportunity here. I think what we're doing is really good, and I'd like to go around one more time and ask each of you, what are we working on? What are you working on that's helping bring this out so that people can be more aware? How do people reach out to you and get more information and help? How do people join your webcasts that you do, your brilliant webcasts, and what else can be done?
So I'm on most socials. I'm less active on Twitter. I'm less active.
We're all less active on Twitter until
My
it's about
account's
being
still there.
I don't mind talking about that.
My account's still there, and you can still find me there at IFC, but I'm not often on there. LinkedIn is probably my preferred platform at the moment, so LinkedIn is a good place to find me and drop me a message. And I'm happy to record, happy to really give anybody a platform. And really, at the heart of what I've always tried to do is find people who are less known. To record with and really get the voices of people who are going through it and living it and really sharing those stories and opening up those conversations. I'm not sure that I reach the right people all the time, but the right people eventually, I believe in the ripple effect. So
You're being intentional, and that's what matters.
Yeah.
What about you, Jen? How can we find you and what are you working on?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm still on Twitter or X or however it identifies these days. Autistic, so creature of habit, hard for me to change routine. And then I'm also on YouTube. I've been going through some things focusing on my own mental health. So I'll be picking up some videos on that going soon. So Nerdy Girl AV is my handle.
Thank you very much for being here, Jen, and for sharing your story. Kaz, what about you? How can we get in touch with you? Where will we see you next?
Oh, good question. So I'm involved in various trade shows which are happening, but also going to be on LinkedIn and Instagram and X, Twitter, just trying to create a safe place or be known in the industry as someone who is neurodivergent and not necessarily going, hey, I need the flags and stuff, but by sharing relevant things that I've found. And I found by doing that, I think neurodivergent people kind of naturally migrate to one another, which is why I've got to know Iffat through another story for another time. But just that general sense of creating that safety in places, particularly in trade show environments as well, where it can be very overwhelming, and then applying that across all levels of kind of events and workplaces, really.
Okay. Well, I appreciate all of you being here and having this conversation. The one point that we didn't make that I will make for myself, and I'm assuming I'm making it for all the rest of you as well, you can correct me if I'm wrong. While we would love to have you as social partners, as guests on our webcast, as things that we do, I'm also here for you to reach out if you need to have a conversation about this, and we don't have to disclose it. If you want to reach out to me on LinkedIn, on any one of my 5,000 emails, just I tell people, just Google David J. Danto. There's only one other David Danto in the world. He's in Canada. He's a psychologist. I'm not him. Every other hit is me. So reach out if if you're a parent and you don't know how to deal with a child that's on the spectrum. If you yourself are going through issues and you'd like to hear from a peer, you'd like to understand how to do this. If you're a manager at a company or an owner at a company and you'd like to do more to help and you'd like some advice, none of us are charging for any of this. It's just to really help the community. It's what we want to do. So, and most of us will be in the next couple of weeks at Infocom, which is taking place in the middle of June. So if there's no other place you'd like to meet up and chat, I certainly will clear some time on my schedule to meet up and chat with you there. And I'm sure the others that are attending will be happy to do that as well. So thank you all. Thank you, Iffat. Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Kaz. I really appreciate that. That's it for this week's episode of UC Weekly News. I'm your host, David Danto. Look forward to chatting with you next week. Take care.